So in this segment, we're going to be talking about UK exports to the EU may drop further by another 8% as Finland, Luxembourg, Portugal and Greece benefit from Brexit. So what this is pointing at is kind of inner EU trade increasing because of the UK not being seen as a reliable exporter, should we say, because of all the paperwork and things. It's created an opportunity for other EU member states to pick up the slack from when we would export goods to the EU. We've already seen this with pork when certain British farmers would export pork to Germany. That's kind of stopped, really. Well, not stopped, it's slowed down a fair bit last year because it was just too expensive because of the paperwork. And so what happened was they started, Denmark started picking up the slack and exporting a lot more pork to Germany and really replaced us in that respect. That was something I covered last year, I'm going to say. And so this is kind of further kind of evolution of those kinds of story, I suppose. So Brexit could reduce UK's exports to the EU by minus 7.73% by 2025, according to new analysis shared by City AM this morning. This is largely because smaller EU countries are benefiting from Britain's departure from the European Union, according to the report by City broker IG Group, which evaluated export data to determine the impact of Brexit on international trade and to show areas of potential growth. And this makes a lot of sense. This is kind of the point of the EU, which is kind of to phase out third countries and trade internally within itself. That's kind of one of the core ideals of the EU, which is free movement of goods, one of the four pillars. And do you know what, right? There's an insane thing in this article that's buried, right? When you talk about burying the lead, whoever wrote this article, they could have written a very singular article on how much the HMRC systems are going to cost. And do you know what? I'll do a separate video just on that alone, a very short one, because that's crazy. But without dragging this video on too much, the top three countries that benefited from Brexit are Finland, Luxembourg and Portugal. Other countries that benefited from the vacuum left after Brexit included Ireland, who have done well out of services. I think that might be something we talk about at some point. Croatia, which I don't know how they've increased it, but they're a nice travel destination. Got some Croatian friends, they're great. Greece, which definitely needs an economic uplift. Lithuania, which I know very little about, and Cyprus, which is also a great holiday destination. The highest proportional increases occur in locations where trade was smaller to begin with, the firm found. For example, Finland, which is shut out similar exports of aircraft, spacecraft and parts, thereof B estimates are by 11,715, or almost had a pretty Patel moment there, percent. So it's gone up by a lot, at 102 million euros instead of the predicted 0.87 million. So a huge increase for the Finnish kind of spacecraft and aircraft companies here. And that tells you that, supply chains have moved. Airbus did threaten to move out supply chains, but it wouldn't just be them, it'd be other companies that aren't as big. And do you know what? Fair play to some of these other companies have said, look, the UK can't supply you with goods, but we can. And, they've done well from it. It's going to create jobs in other countries. Great, unless you live in the UK like I do. Sucks. Meanwhile, Luxembourg's actual figures for exports show an increase of 2,017% above estimates at 16.38 million instead of 0.77 million. Again, I'm really nervous about having a Pretty Patel moment on the mic. The team evaluated the UK's main exports prior to Brexit, such as precious metals, vehicles, pharmaceutical products. So if we look at these, right, precious metals, to prove the origins of them, it wouldn't be that hard. Vehicles, you're gonna have to prove you're gonna have to prove that the vast majority of the car was manufactured in the UK. And as we know, some of these parts will have to be imported, and that's what causes huge problems. Pharmaceutical products, again, you've got rules of origins, and they have to make sure that they adhere to EU laws because the UK are continuously moaning and saying we're going to deregulate. Alongside the top exporters of the same product in the EU and Singapore to understand which countries were able to increase exports. So they looked at the UK and said, look, what's going on with trade here? And they compared that with the EU and Singapore to kind of get a better analysis of the situation. And let's not forget, they would have done this over the 2 years. So the first year COVID hit and kind of the second year when Brexit hit. UK to EU trade, EU to UK trade, more red tape. Meanwhile, any British business may give up importing as a result of strict new rules that came into force. Well, not really new, but again, these are third country rules. That's the thing. It does annoy me when people, oh, these are like new rules, when they're kind of not, apart from the biometric stuff. A former civil servant in charge of Brexit planning warned recently that about the import checks. Philip Rycroft, who was permanent secretary for the Department of Exiting the European Union, so the Brexit Department, between 2017 and 19, said with the introduction to new barriers to the trade bloc, Rycroft said businesses may decide it's simply not worth the hassle because it is so much paperwork. There is a separate article we're going to talk about where they talk about the issues around the niche products. You know, you're talking about Greek cheese, Sicilian citrus, and British headaches. So this talks about kind of the more niche products like chorizo and things like that. We go back to the City AM piece. So the Federation of Small Businesses reckon that a quarter of their members are ready, but I guarantee they're probably not, considering how bad things are. And once we start doing physical checks, it's peak. There will be teething problems, thanks. But the big question is how many businesses will think it's not worth it, especially when you look at the queue times, if you follow Kieran, the van driver. Rules of origins of documents have also become marginally stricter. I mean, they haven't become marginally stricter, they've become way stricter, because last year you could say, oh yeah, was this stuff made majority in the UK? And they're like, yes. And then now they're like, was this stuff made majority in the UK? Yes, okay, prove it. With declarations needing to be made when goods arrive here. Rykoff said there will be complicated ingredients, blah, blah, blah. Certain products contain different bits of or ingredients, so you're talking about a car, different pieces, and food like ready meals and sandwiches, where the M&S guy got a rough lesson in that. He said, asked if the country will see rising prices or empty shelves. We're already seeing both of those, saying I wouldn't over dramatise it. I think at the margins there are new costs, which is true, which will ultimately have to be borne by the consumers, which is the public. HMRC, this is the kicker here. This is where City AM, right? I don't want to be mean to you guys because you've written a good piece here. You've buried the lead, because HMRC reckon that the total cost of these new systems will be something in like £13 billion a year. £13 billion, right, to get this system up and running. Now, if we look at the UK's contribution to the EU, right, in the UK, in 2019, which was the last year we were a full member and paid in like normally, I think, the UK made an estimated gross contribution after the rebate of 14.4 billion, okay? So I know what Brexit is, I'm like, oh, that's less than 13 billion, me. But there's more. The UK received £5 billion of public sector receipts from the EU. So the UK's net public sector contribution to the EU was estimated at 9.4 billion. That's less than 13 billion. And that's just on import checks. But there's more. Ladies and gentlemen, there is more. There are different ways to measure the funds the UK receives from the EU. The above figure of 5 billion includes only funding allocated to the government directly. However, the EU Commission also allocates funding directly to UK organisations, often allowing a competitive process. In recent years, these funds have been worth around 1 to 2 billion to the UK. Accounting for these receipts results in the UK making an average net contribution of £7.7 billion between 2014 and 2018. And for anyone who doubts me, this is from the government website. This is in the Commons Library. So our net contribution on average between 2014 and 2018 was £7.7 billion a year, okay? The goddamn import costs, right? Forget everything else, right? Forget all the costs to trade, all the, the problems with the end of freedom of movement, all the staffing issues, right? The import system alone costs more than our entire EU contribution. The import system alone. And this is for the IT system. We don't even know what staffing costs are. Maybe we're generous when we say 13 billion includes staffing costs. 13 billion is worth way more than 7.4 billion. And this is on import checks alone, right? This is madness. This is where, I don't want to be mean, but I think that the writer of this article and the editor buried the lead here, which is, I would have wrote the article as UK uses net, the whatever the amount is, what's that, 6 billion from Brexit just on import checks. Crazy. I would have worded it better, obviously. Not that much, but they have an editor. An editor can help them, so. That's a lot of money by any token spread across a big population like the UK. Of course, That's modest increases in cost though through the supply chain. And again, companies are going to have to pay for customs declarations and things like that and paperwork to get checked. So not great. I mean, sure, to an extent this creates jobs, but again, you don't want to create jobs that are just going to further increase prices elsewhere. It doesn't make sense. This is why the OBR reckons that the net impact of this deal on our wealth as a country will reduce it by 4% in the medium term, which is, I think, double the damage COVID will do. That's because trade between the UK and the EU will be a lot less free than it was when we were in the single market. And do you know what? Just for the fun of it, right? I'm actually going to do a separate video just on this bit. Where's it gone? There it is. I'm going to do a separate video just on that. £13 billion on HMRC, the cost of these new systems. A year. If it was 13 billion initially, okay, that's way too much, but okay, a year to maintain it. Jesus. That is so much money. Vote for Brexit, we're going to waste 13 billion a year on import checks alone. Stick that on a bus. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.